If we care for classical music to not only survive, but thrive, it really must be inclusive.
There are a lot of people talking about how we can diversify and how we can include. The Sphinx is actually doing it.
Sphinx has truly exceeded any of my wildest dreams. And I'm a pretty big dreamer. When I founded Sphinx, a lot of people thought we shouldn't try to build diversity in classical music. Thankfully, I never hear that anymore. And that's because of the extraordinary work and excellence that all of our Sphinx musicians bring to bear.
The most important lesson of Sphinx's founding was the creation of the family. Sphinx, from its very inception, was a very entrepreneurial organization, one that's been responsive to its constituents, to its artists.
Wow! Drop the mic. There are millions of kids like this in this country who do not have the resources to become everything that they could be. But fortunately, these programs are doing the job that the bigger society fails to do.
I really love teaching for the Overture program. I think it helps the children to develop confidence, their patience, and I think just fun.
While it was launched with the idea of spotlighting and empowering young people of color who were playing classical music, it was quickly envisioned to be something bigger than that, because we saw a need for reinforcing a pipeline, for preparing young people, and also for creating a safe and a wonderful trajectory for these young artists so that they can see themselves on a professional stage in an executive office, making decisions and really shaping the future and the face of classical music.
The Sphinx LEAD program is a 2-year program for aspiring arts administrators. The mentorship has been incredible, and I also have a wonderful network of cohorts. We spend a lot of time together to support each other and share opportunities.
I think the Sphinx organization is so incredibly important. It tries to achieve in our society an equilibrium of people who are incredibly talented and motivated to be part of every aspect of our society.
Sphinx really has become a movement of social change. I find myself now more optimistic about our future than I ever have been in the past.
The scale of our programs has grown tremendously. Just in the last year and a half, our audiences have increased by more than 100%. And by really understanding that we can only achieve artistic excellence if we are diverse and inclusive, we can really not only augment Sphinx's mission, but do wonders for our entire field. Yeah, and then they have me top that. Ah, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Sphinx Connect 2024 Amplify. And let me just say what a joy it is to welcome so many of you to our beloved, balmy Detroit. I want to acknowledge Jessie Hubbs and his exquisite performance that I think speaks for itself. But I think you'll agree that it also sets the tone for our whole weekend together, a weekend of excellence for all of us.
I also hope you might amplify my words of immense gratitude to Jay Klein and Cheyenne King Bales, the incredible, yeah. That's the dream team at Sphinx that put together the whole experience of Sphinx Connect for all of us. So we definitely are in their debt. This week is about celebration of our artists and leaders and the values that we all share together. Excellence in diversity, our collective impact thus far, as well as the promise that our work together still holds for the future. And just like much of this content that you'll experience this weekend, this year's theme for Sphinx Connect came directly from the members of our community. A lot of this work was co-curated in partnership with so many of you here in the room and so many of you that are watching from elsewhere in the world. So you're gonna say, what does it actually mean to amplify? We envisioned it as an opportunity to acknowledge, to highlight, and to advance the amazing work that gets done daily, all year round in our community. So earlier this year, many of you may have caught the PBS NewsHour special on television that was done on Sphinx and its work. Thank you. But if you did, then you probably met and might remember the 9-year-old little violinist and pianist named Taniel. In an interview with the news crew, Taniel told the world that my violin means everything to him, and in fact that he loves it as much as his mom. So mom was in the room with us. I don't know how they got home. I'm not sure how she felt about it, but that's what he said. And then, in an unceremonious way, as soon as he was finished playing and interviewing, Taniel ran to a keyboard positioned at the gym in one of the schools where we teach all year round, so that he can play some tunes by ear and help get his entire classroom of classmates in the spirit of things. That was how I learned of his wickedly quick pitch and his secondary passion, which was apparently piano. So our family of teaching artists, led by our wonderful director of education, Dr. Anna Branches, figured out a way to get piano to Taniel's house and get him piano lessons. And I'm happy to say that today Taniel is thriving on both the violin and piano. So you might just be thinking, it's an awesome thing, but you might be thinking that I'm just sharing this story to illustrate and amplify that Taniel's story is synonymous with this year's theme, and that's what we're all about. But check this out, because the story doesn't even end here, because in a conversation with one of our foundation partners later that week, Mr. Taniel asked his own question, and that was, what was that foundation going to do about helping more kids like Taniel get lessons, and when can the program that Sphinx runs there in that area get bigger? So really, amplifying is a self-fulfilling joy of shedding light, of making space, but also using our voices, however big or small, to augment those of others. So Taniel was as much amplifying our mission and the voices of his classmates as we were hoping to do in working with PBS to share the work in Southwest Detroit, where hundreds of children just like Taniel receive full scholarship education all year round, as well as the summer. So whether it is seeing the joy in Taniel's eyes when the upright piano was delivered to his home, or watching Jessie Hubbs on television about 6 years ago for the first time, which was my introduction to his talent, and then reaching out to search far and wide and find his mom, Tony, who's here with us, by the way, so round of applause for Tony. Or whether it is admiring and learning from the work of our sister organizations like Quinteto Latino or SOLA or Castle of Our Skins or Gateways Festivals and so many others, the work of amplifying is gratifying and necessary all year round for all of us, not just at Sphinx Connect one time a year. But amplifying is not always a pleasant act. Sometimes it is a work of bringing the light to that which is unjust and often unspoken. So we've all been encouraged and inspired in this sector by the progress made by American orchestras in the sphere of repertoire diversification, where in the span of the last 9 years, the cumulative repertoire by Black and Latinx composers went from only 0.5% to more than 16%. That's great. Simultaneously, yeah, sure, let's, yeah. So we should all amplify that, and in fact, all of us, if we're not programming this way, we should all year round, not just during Sphinx Connect, and certainly not just January. But simultaneously, we are, or should be, amplifying the fact that C-suite executive leadership, though, in our industry has not seen any statistical growth in decades. And actually, in the last 4 years, it experienced a decline. And that is a trend that is both inexcusable, and in need of immediate change. So then, what does amplifying look like here when we're not talking about celebration? I'll say it won't be enough, and it is not enough for me to call it out or for any of us to do so. We must make an individual and then a collective decision to not settle until every single position opening at our organization has an applicant pool that gives our leaders, all leaders of color, a fair shot. And that we overcompensate for years of apathy in this area and to specifically seek out and identify Black and Latinx candidates at the highest level for every single position at every level so that we can repair the pipeline and then especially to amplify and elevate the deserving leaders whose candidacy has been trivialized or disregarded for all the wrong reasons. So yes. Amplifying does go both ways, thank you. It is not enough to be the candle or the mirror that reflects it anymore. We must simply understand that if we care for our beloved art form or our industry to survive, it must change its fabric and represent all of us at every single level, and especially the executive level. The very viability of our work together and individually depends on this. This week at Sphinx Connect, I'm going to ask each of you, without exception, to become fellow amplifiers. We'll make up some words, because if we're not making up words, are we even convening? We're not. So basically, I ask all of you, along with myself, to become an amplifier. And that means we commit to stop wishing and start acting. Let's amplify the uncomfortable and work together to get to where we all must do together. A more fair, just, and well-represented, and therefore a more excellent future for all of our artists and leaders. Yes, thank you. Speaking of excellence, a certain member of our community had that one basic core criteria required in starting a student project more than 27 years ago. That was the Sphinx competition for young Black and Latinx artists, where the very best young artists, and notice I said very best young artists, would come and compete and be recognized for their excellence. So nearly 3 decades later, we at Sphinx are pursuing the very same principle, just in a much more amplified manner, with 1,200 alumni reaching more than 100 million through our digital reach worldwide. And today, it gives me a great honor and pleasure to bring to the stage the ultimate Sphinx amplifier. President Obama's first appointment to the National Council in the Arts, member of President Biden's Arts Policy Committee. He is a professor of arts leadership and entrepreneurship at the University of Michigan. He is a member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, a social entrepreneur, a critically acclaimed author of 6 books, including several bestsellers, and a visual and a performing artist. He serves as the Poetjournalist in residence for the Rodham Institute at George Washington University, Complexions Modern Ballet, Char Music, and many others. Hailed by Newsweek as one of 15 people who make America great, don't laugh. He is the visionary behind the work of the Sphinx organization and the founder of the Institute for Poetjournalism. Familia, it is now time to introduce the founder of Sphinx organization and my partner in life, Aaron Dworkin.
Thank you all so much. It is, of course, just wonderful to be here with all of you. And in this very intimate setting, it feels very intimate with Familia. Words can't describe just the sense of community that is enhanced, amplified this time of year when we're all able to actually be in each other's presence, physically and those tuning in virtually. So just thank you for being here, and Afa, thank you for your extraordinary leadership and the team. Sphinx just would not be what it is without you. It's so nice. So it is my distinct honor to be able to introduce our opening plenary guest who will be joining me for a conversation here this evening. For more than 25 years, Dr. Maria Rosario Jackson's work has focused on understanding and elevating arts, culture, and design as critical elements of healthy communities. She is a graduate of UCLA with a doctorate in urban planning and holds a Master of Public Administration degree from USC. She is currently on leave from Arizona State University, where she's a tenured professor in the Herberger Institute for Design and the Arts, where she leads the Studio for Creativity, Place, and Equitable Communities. For almost 10 years, she also served as senior advisor for arts and culture and strategic learning, research and evaluation at the Kresge Foundation. In addition, for 18 years, Dr. Jackson worked at the Urban Institute and was the founding director of the Urban Institute's Culture, Creativity, and Communities program. She was co-chair of the County of Los Angeles Cultural Equity and Inclusion Initiative, and most recently served on the advisory boards of the Smithsonian Center for Folklife and Cultural Heritage, the Equity Center at the University of Virginia, as well as LA Commons. She served on the board of directors of the Performing Arts Center of Los Angeles County, the Association of Arts Administration Educators, and the Alliance for California Traditional Arts. After her confirmation by the United States Senate, Dr. Jackson became the 13th chair of the National Endowment for the Arts in January of 2022. Yes. With this historic appointment by President Biden, Dr. Jackson is the first African-American and Mexican-American woman to serve as chair of the NEA, and she is a member of the Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority. Everyone, please join me in welcoming the chair of the National Endowment for the Arts. A wonderful, wonderful welcome. And you'll see some photos that will come up as we have our discussion. And by the way, be thinking of questions. We will open it up for Q&A at the end. So curious kind of, and I think a lot of people always, when people are in extraordinary leadership positions, they want to know about the beginning. And so just kind of curious, you grew up in South LA. Wondering what that was like, and also were there moments as you were growing up that kind of began to form or set your sense of identity and who you were?
Absolutely. It's so wonderful to be here with you, Aaron, and wonderful to be in Detroit again. It was such an honor to be here. A few months ago, council members Ishmael Ahmed and Gretchen Davidson, Gonzalez Davidson, created this wonderful tour of Detroit, and it was fantastic to get to see them in action and to see neighborhoods. We're talking about neighborhoods and where people grow up. South LA is home, and when I was growing up there, it was primarily an African-American community. And when we say South LA, LA is huge, like Detroit is huge, right? So there are many neighborhoods within South LA. The neighborhood that I lived in was a working class neighborhood with lots of people with integrity and aspirations and interesting histories. Los Angeles has a lot of African-American migrants from Texas and Louisiana, so the migratory story is a Texas and Louisiana story. It's a little different from mine because my family, on my father's side, some of it was from the South, Alabama to Ohio, and then Ohio to California. But it was a place that I think was full of families and love and people who were proud of where they came from and were generous with their stories. And I think that that was part of my growing up. And in terms of seminal moments that are formative in identity, I think of my dad, who I miss terribly. He's passed away a couple of decades ago now. And it was so important for him to make sure that my brother and I understood who he was, where he came from. And he resorted to the arts to help us know that, and not just know that intellectually, but with head, heart, and hand, to understand it here. And that was important to him. Right. So that was part of growing up, was exposure and making sure that we understood, on my dad's side, certainly the African American culture that he brought, the culture that was evident in our neighbors, and some extended family that we had there. Yeah.
And summers in Mexico City, your mom's hometown. So how was that? What were those experiences like? And also then, did that also help kind of add to your formation of your sense of
Absolutely.
identity?
So school would let out, and within a couple of days we were on our way to Mexico City, and we were there the whole summer until it was time to come back to school. So I'd never really experienced a summer in the US until I was, late into my teens. But it was really important for my mother, one, to have that connection with her family. She was the only one in the US. There was no family on her side in the US, and it was very important for her to make sure that we felt that connection with family and that we understood the culture. And here too, again, she resorted to the arts to make sure we understand who she was and where she came from and where, what we were inheriting in a sense.
So there's all of this arts embedded, and ultimately you end up going to UCLA, but you get a doctorate in urban planning. So how did that come about, and how did the arts, of course, now in retrospect, we see this amazing connection, but why urban planning?
So, I started undergrad, I think, actually wanting to go into social work. And I was discouraged because people who I knew that were in the social work profession were talking about how difficult it was and how much it demanded. And it's not always well paying. And these are things that they wanted me to consider. And there was always this kernel to want to be helpful and to make change. So I ended up not doing social work, but I was a decent writer, and I was interested in how people formed ideas and where they got their information, so I actually majored in journalism. And when I was done with journalism, I decided, I think I want to do something else. And I was really interested in public programs. So I did a Master of Public Administration, and in that program, it was at USC, at University of Southern California, I was very young, and I was in class with people who already had positions in government and were making decisions. They were there to get their master's degree to advance. I was there right out of undergrad. And I had the benefit of naivete in some way. And I would listen to my classmates who would talk about their work either at the county or in the city or in federal government, and the decisions that they were making and the things that they were concerned about professionally. And there was a very interesting undercurrent of understanding communities in ways that felt foreign to me. And there was one instance where it got my attention so much that I was like, how do people go about formulating what they think about the communities that they are actually impacting? And how do they form those opinions? How do they inform their way of thinking about what happens in a neighborhood, or who these people are, or what they deserve or don't deserve? And I became more and more interested in those questions and getting to how do you even frame an issue to understand how to work on it. And I meandered into urban planning because at the time, the program that I ended up going to at UCLA, people were asking those questions. And I needed to be in that space to question the things that I was hearing as unquestioned.
Right. So this leads to then almost 18 years at the Urban Institute, a think tank. And I know especially when I used to think what on earth is a think tank? What do they do in a think tank? And I talk with a lot of my students at Michigan, what happens at a think, what does that mean actually? So can you share what happens at a think tank? What is life like in a think tank?
You're reminding me of my Aunt Ruth in Ohio who passed away, but I would go visit her, and she didn't really understood what I did. She knew I had a job, so that was good. But she didn't really understand what I did. So she'd make me go to church with her, and she would introduce me to her friends, and she said, "This is my niece. She lives in Washington, D.C. She deals with all those urban problems." That's it. But a think tank is it's a place where people do research, where you do bring big public policy issues and you examine them and you make recommendations about what are the best decisions to make if you're trying to reach certain outcomes. My experience at the Urban Institute, which is where I was for so long, was I was focused on neighborhoods, and I was focused on inequity and addressing inequity. And I knew from my own personal experience that the arts had to be part of what this organization that was informing policy, that was helping people craft the frameworks that would direct money, that would lead to program design, that the arts had to be part of that solution, part of that formulation. So what I did at the Urban Institute, I led research projects that were focused on quality of life and how is it that we would think about integrating arts and culture in how we fathom healthy communities where all people can thrive. How would we do that? How would we do that alongside concerns around housing and education and labor? That was my job through a number of initiatives.
So, and it's already literally decades ago integrating the arts into, and of course this will play into later in our discussion and the work that you're leading now. So I have a couple of just short video clips throughout our conversation, and this is the first I wanted to play in doing my research and backgrounding. This was just a few comments that you shared, I think, at Boston University.
We say we want to eliminate poverty, we want to reduce injustice, all these things. A lot of that requires paradigm shift. It requires us to think fundamentally differently about some basic things. And what is true is that in order, and there's science behind this, in order for people to be available to paradigm shift, you have to touch them head, heart, and hand.
So you see why I pulled that, right? So at ASU, you lead the Studio for Creativity, Place, and Equitable Communities. And I was wondering, what does that studio do, and does that work relate to this paradigm shift that you're referring to that we need?
So the work that I was doing at ASU through the Studio for Creativity Place and Equitable Communities was very much about the work I've been doing my whole life from different perches. In this case, it was higher ed, and it was about creating the spaces where we could think differently about what was the confluence of perspectives that actually lead to change. So, part of what I did at ASU through that studio was develop these opportunities for faculty to encounter other faculty from other divisions or other academic fields that they may never really have come in contact with otherwise. Like, why would faculty from social work be working with photographers? Or why would people in public safety be working with musicians? So, my appointment was Herberger Institute for Design and the Arts and the Watts College of Public Service and Community Solutions. And so much of my work was about that bridge and helping create these opportunities for out-of-the-box thinking to happen, for instances where people could get unstuck. And that was some of the work, right? And in the process, creating new curricula for students who had an interest in making a difference in the world and trying to pave some pathways that allowed for the integration of art, culture, design, creativity, alongside these other quote-unquote helping professions.
All right. So switching gears just a little bit, because your career trajectory is just so fascinating. There's so much to learn. And so I am sure that there are a number of people in our Sphinx Connect community who are potentially seeking tenured positions at various academic institutions. And as I mentioned, you're a tenured professor. And so I was just wondering, from your experiences, what advice do you have about how to achieve what is really seen so much as not only kind of the associated acclaim, but security for one to be able to kind of continue their work and their career? Suggestions, recommendations, best practices to reach that?
I think first off, get clear on what your compass is. Like, what is it? What's your work as a person? Whether you decide to take an academic path or not. And, my path wasn't traditionally academic, right? So I didn't go from being a doctoral student to an assistant professor, which a lot of people do. I did something else and then found my way back into the academy. And I think my pathway was maybe a little unconventional because I was writing and putting forward ideas out in the world and work out in the world, but it wasn't intended to bend to what was being published necessarily. So in some ways it was, if I had wanted to pursue a traditional academic career and do what was my compass, I was going to have a really hard time because my work didn't really fit anywhere. I've been always in the realm of betwixt and in between. And so in order to bend and comply with what journals were looking for, I would have had to drift from what I knew my work was in my core. So I continued. Somebody asked me, Aaron, years ago, what's the thing? This was like, you go to conferences and they ask you to do a icebreaker, and you have to answer a question. So one time the question was, what are you most proud of in your career? And my answer was that I stuck with it. That I didn't deviate from the thing that I knew I was supposed to be doing. And I had early in my career, I had very well-meaning colleagues and even some mentors ask, if you care about injustice and poverty and racism and all of these things, why are you doing this arts and culture stuff? As if it was off mission. And they were like, why aren't you doing housing? Or why aren't you doing economic development, which was more legible in the urban planning, public policy world. And the questions used to annoy me. And early in my career, I didn't have the language to, in a compelling and succinct way, tell them why. But eventually I found the language, and what I've been able to say for many years now is that if you look around the world and throughout the ages in strategies to disempower, the first thing that is tinkered with or taken away is one's ability to make sense of the world, to be creative, to be expressive, to have dominion over your own story, which are the things that we do through the arts. And I've always said that if it's so important that it has to be tampered with in order to disempower, why don't we think of it as core to building communities? So I've been able to say that now, but when I was first asked that, I was just annoyed, you know.
Well, it truly is amazing, and all ultimately led to a series of moments, including this one.
And that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office upon which I am about to enter. So help me God. Congratulations, Madam Chair. There we go.
So you are chair of the National Endowment for the Arts, and obviously Gretchen, Ish, and I are honored to be able to serve on the council and support your leadership. And everyone knows generally about the NEA, of course, but what does a chair of the National Endowment for the Arts do? Because a lot of times I ask people and they're like, I guess lead all the grant giving, right? So what does a chair of the NEA do? How do you spend your time?
I'm looking at my chief of staff who's sitting in the third row. He could probably answer better than I. You know, the charge of the chair is to provide direction to the agency during the time period that you have that position. And that's my job. My job is to make sure that the agency meets its basic functions and that it evolves to meet the challenges and opportunities of our time. And I think at this time, from this perch, one of the things that I'm excited about is creating the environment where the Arts Endowment continues its work as a grant maker, which it always is, and a national resource. Because what is clear to me is that in addition to the resources that we're able to provide to the public through grants and our congressional allocation, that we have other currencies and other assets that we can deploy in service of mission. And I think about some of those, these are functions as well. We have the ability to convene. We have the platform to make, to amplify, to use your theme, to amplify important ideas and practices and ways of working. We have connection to the rest of the federal family and the ability at our best to work with them and figure out how together we can help fulfill the promise of this nation. And my job, I think, is to figure out how to unlock opportunities where artists and cultural organizations can deliver what they have to offer to the world. And it is in those kinds of partnerships that we're able to make progress. That's some of what the chair does. There's speaking engagements. There's some things that are really lovely. I saw that there was a picture of me giving a commencement address, which is, to me, very special, because those are times that are really pivotal for people as they move through their lives, and to be able to offer some words of encouragement or advice feels special.
And as you do this work, are there other like key either departments or people who are in leadership and government that it might surprise our audience, our community, to think, oh, the chair of the NEA is having discussions with that particular department or that type of work?
Tune into the summit on Monday. So we are having a summit at the NEA called Healing, Bridging, Thriving, the role of the arts in our communities, arts and culture in our communities. And I think you will see a lot of combinations that might be surprising. So one long-standing relationship that we've had at the Arts Endowment is a relationship with the Department of Defense and Department of Veterans Affairs. And people are often like, what are you doing with the Department of Defense? And what we're doing is actually some really marvelous work that is about 12 years old now. And it is working with military personnel who have what they call invisible wounds, brain injury, and post-traumatic stress disorder. And they've been working with creative arts therapists for a number of years now. And they're looking at what happens to the brain and to our ability to heal when people are in creative flow. So whether they're making music or working in visual arts or writing, what has been amazing is that this has been very rigorously documented practices and research that show how you're physically available to healing in ways that are very uncommon when you are in creative flow. And I mean, it's an incredible collaboration and contribution because we're helping people who have served our country heal. And I think there are so many implications for other populations as well. So that's one example, right?
Yeah,
So there's,
absolutely.
so we're talking with the folks at DOD and the VA all the time. We have a not surprising relationship with the Department of Education, which is about 30 years long. And that's on arts education. We work with the General Services Administration. Do people know what the General Services Administration is? It's like the landlord for the federal government. And in that program, there's a 0.5% for arts program where whenever there are investments in physical infrastructure that GSA, or buildings or renovations, that GSA has dominion over, a percentage has to go for public art. So we work with them to ensure that word gets out, that the kind of artists that are considered, that it is inclusive, that it's diverse, that the kind of work that happens is one that helps tell the story fully of our American richness and our diversity. So those are some examples of.
Absolutely, yeah.
Where they're like, wait a minute, what's the NEA doing with General Services Administration? What are they doing with Department of Defense? What are they doing with,
Which is, it's incredible, incredible work. And one other aspect, of course, about the NEA is grants, and I am sure there are some people in the room, either themselves, the institutions they represent, they're like, yeah, we need that NEA money. Any suggestions on kind of, these are some of the key things that tend to be inherent in successful grants or organizations that tend to be successful with grant funding from the NEA?
I think whether it's the NEA or any other funder or any other entity that one is trying to enlist support from, I think it's really important to be able to tell your story. There are important technical things that get covered in webinars that we do that have to do with how to apply and how to use the system that's available to you to apply and that kind of thing. But I think that there's a process that you should all be aware of, which is a public process, and it involves panelists who come from all parts of the country. People here are eligible to be panelists, should apply to become a panelist. We need you, we need diverse perspectives. And so these proposals are adjudicated through a public paneling process. They then go to staff where, they figure out who's eligible and the criteria met, et cetera. Then it goes, as you know, to council. So we're so grateful to our National Council of the Arts that reviews the material that is presented and helps to adjudicate that process. But I encourage people to become panelists, to attend the webinars, and they're recorded and archived usually, to learn about how to apply. Staff wants to see people do this work. Ask questions, reach out. Staff is incredibly responsive. And one thing that I'm very proud about when I go around the country is I hear people who have interacted with our staff, and they tell me that they were helpful, that they appreciated the time that was invested in helping to get them to where they could apply and what have you. So don't be afraid. And please become involved in the public adjudication process.
Awesome, awesome. So there also, I loved your comment that you had on Lori Walsh's show. Wanted to share this.
It's also about making, doing, teaching, learning, and doing so because it's part of what makes us healthy and whole. It's part of how we express our humanity. And the notion of artful lives really does, I think, embrace the idea that the arts have to be embedded in our communities, in our daily lived experience.
So of course I love that, and embedding the art into our lives. So when you say an artful life, what do you mean? And if there's anyone in our community who's saying, okay, but what can I do to embed the arts in my community or in my life, what would your suggestions be?
Yeah, I think that in order to have artful lives, we have to have an elastic concept about arts engagement. And as I was saying earlier, it's not only about experiencing art as audience, although that is certainly important. It's something we should all have the opportunity to do. That said, I think it's also about recognizing that part of our humanity is our creativity and the ability to act on that. Not because everyone is going to be an artist or because everyone is going to be the best painter or violinist or actor or whatever, but because it is part of what it means to be fully human. So the ability to have those opportunities for engagement, whether it's individually or communally, that's something that I think is part of healthy neighborhoods. It's part of healthy places where people can thrive. Is there an opportunity to act on my creativity? is there an opportunity for the exchange of creative practice? Can I witness something that inspires awe? Can I ask questions about the world through some creative means? I think, when I was doing the work at the Urban Institute and we were looking at quality of life issues, those were the kinds of things that I was trying to figure out. How do we do this consistently? How do we make sure that there are artists in our communities, that there are art centers, that there is opportunity for amateur practice? And I don't mean amateur in a pejorative way. Amateur, I mean with the root word because you love it. That there is opportunity to do the creative things that you love. How do we make sure that that is part of what healthy places have to offer?
Yeah. So everyone today seems to be talking about AI. AI this, AI that, everything we do apparently is getting transformed and everyone's getting fired and the world's going to change. Although hopefully artists will be the most difficult. Just curious, especially from your perspective, and Perch as a leader, what do you think about AI as it relates to the arts, and how any warnings or optimism you have for all of us?
AI is a technological evolution. And I know that there's a lot of fear about it. In other camps, there's also a lot of enthusiasm about what's possible because of it. I think that we don't know exactly what it means. And I also think that if we are clear about what we value most, and those values infuse the evolution of AI, we'll be in a better place. So if there is respect for creation, respect for creators, if there is a set of values that actually helps us understand AI as something that isn't necessarily malignant, there's an evolution of technology that we will ultimately figure out how to use. But I think we have to get clear about our values as this evolves.
Gotcha.
And if there isn't clarity about values, then there's a lot of risk.
Yeah. Absolutely. So a lot of times people like to say, oh, this historic role, this is a historic moment. It is historic. You are the first African American and Mexican woman to lead and be chair of the National Endowment for the Arts. It is historic. You are historic. And so I wonder if that weighs on you, positively or negatively. Is it in your mind as you go about your work and your interactions, or was it just kind of a temporary, but now I want to get to work?
Yeah, I don't think of it as a burden. I think of it as a springboard. I think that there's a set of experiences that inform how I look at things, that inform the ability to see that multiple worldviews can be valid, that there can be paradigms of excellence that are legitimate but constructed differently. So there is something about being Black, being Mexican, being Black and Mexican in the US that carries with it a set of experiences and a set of experiences in a perspective that I think bodes well if we're trying to advance inclusivity. And I am grateful that I have that to offer. And I think it's necessary in this moment in ways that if we don't embrace really the call to be inclusive, we will be in peril. So I hope that what I have to offer, because I bring with me the experiences that I've had as well as the experiences that I've inherited, I hope that that opens up some ways, pathways that lead us to truly an inclusive country.
Is there anything you would share, if there's anyone in our audience, and there might be those who are in leadership capacities or any capacity at institutions where they may be the only person of color in their circumstances, and that sometimes those circumstances may feel challenging or overwhelming. Any suggestions or solutions to addressing if you find yourself in those circumstances?
I think if there is an opportunity to develop some kind of circle of peers that may also be experiencing some of those circumstances, I think that's really important. Sometimes you need to be able to talk to somebody and hear back, you're not crazy, or yeah, you heard that and that wasn't right. So I do think that the ability to have peers and have spaces where you can have candid conversations that allow you to process what it is to be in that position, that feels really important. Yeah. So that's one thing that I would say. And I think there's something about self-care also, and being able to put some boundaries up, because when you are the only one, you will get tapped over and over and over and over. So the ability to have some boundaries and be judicious about how you spend your energy, which is not infinite. When do you say yes and when do you say no? Or not this time? Or maybe you need to get some more people in here so they can spread the work. I think those are things that come to mind when you ask that question, Aaron.
Absolutely, thank you. So I want to begin to get ready for Q&A. I have one more question before we do that. And on my show Arts Engines, I always ask this kind of closing type of question, but it relates to challenges. So I cannot begin to imagine that there are some challenging days as chair of the NEA and various things that happen in leading such a large organization, institution, and literally having not even just national but global impact. And when you are in the midst of those challenging times, is there mechanisms that you use or solutions that you have as someone who is a leader that we could potentially incorporate when we face some of the challenges in our own lives?
Yeah, one of the pieces of advice that I've shared when I've been asked to do commencement speeches is to find your tribe. And these are the people who are committed to the same purpose or a related purpose, and people who want to see you succeed and who you want to see succeed. And I often say, some of these folks may be in your immediate circle, right? They can be you're lucky when it's your staff. I'm lucky. I have a really good staff, including our chief of staff who's here with me today. But people that you can trust, people who you know you have each other's back, you know that you're pushing towards the same goal, go to them. And I think some of those folks have come before us and we stand on their shoulders. Some of those folks we may not have met yet because there will emerge. But I think of, I think when I think of the tribe, I think of mentors. I think of artists that inspire me. The words of Toni Morrison often come to mind. She's a writer that I love. But those folks that you know are moving in the same direction, when you think that you have to do something that requires courage, imagine them all behind you. That's what comes to mind.
Love that. Love that. So we will shift to Q&A time. I think we have about 15 minutes or so. There are 2 microphones on either of the flanking aisles, so feel free to go up to those. And if you are online, you can go on the Sphinx Connect app and use code REN on the app and submit a question, and then staff will see it, and one of them will come and share it at the microphone. All right, so why don't we start on the right?
Hi, my name is Jalen. I go to RIT for New Media Design and a minor in Music Tech. And I was wondering, what advice do you have for the rising generation of artists and leaders, and as we seek to find equity in our field?
So what advice for rising leaders that seek to find equity in the field?
Yep.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think there's something about identifying and removing barriers that feels important. And sometimes what that looks like is going through something that you know is hard and maybe even unfair, and you identify the barrier and you commit to not repeating that or making someone else go through it. So there is something about examining our own experiences and being agents to remove the barriers that we may have had proximity to or have had to overcome when we know that they're not fair. So that's one thing. I think the other thing is bring people with you. You know, when doors are open, bring people with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Great, thank you. And I'll just keep going back and forth. So yes, this side.
Hi, my name is Anne, and I'll be reading questions from the virtual audience. So one question was, how do we, as arts leaders and artists, navigate and respond to shifts in the philanthropic world?
Good question. And in reflecting on my own time in that realm, I think, again, this is similar, one piece of it is similar to the answer that I had for, what makes for a good proposal. Part of being able to tell your story and understand your context, I think, an extension of that is to be able to educate others. So I think that there is something about having enough connection with philanthropy and others that are in a position to invest in what you want to advance, where you can help educate and inform. So there's something about relationship building and being able to share. There's also something about working in and having people in those fields that have the experience and understand in ways that folks that have had distance from the kind of work that you're interested in advancing may not have those insights, right? So there's something valuable about making sure that practitioners are able to, even if it's rotate through philanthropy, so that there's benefit of those kinds of insights and firsthand knowledge.
All right, great. Yes.
Hi, my name is Brianna Garcon, and I am the Program Coordinator for National Community Partnerships at the Kennedy Center. And I'd like to know what excites you most as you look to the future of the arts in our country.
What excites me the most? Right now, everything is the summit on Tuesday. But that said, I think the work that we're trying to advance through that gathering and other things that we're doing at the Arts Endowment, that is exciting. This arts integration work is really important. And some time ago, I was at a conference, and there was a student who asked if, what would, and I'm paraphrasing, but what would be evidence that I had accomplished something that I wanted to accomplish in this role? And my answer was that if we're able to unlock opportunities for artists and creative people to deliver what they have to offer to the world in ways that we may not even imagine right now, that to me is an important contribution. So I am excited about post-pandemic helping to strengthen the cultural sector as we've known it, and extending the parameters of the cultural sector so that we are continuing to advance the important work that we know has value at the intersection of arts and health, or arts and education, or arts and community development. That this embedding of the arts in all facets of our lives is something that becomes normal. That it's something that we actually can be planful about when we think about how are we educating the next generation of artists, that they have a myriad set of options that allow them to deliver what they have to offer. And that the pathways that are so few right now are actually many. That's what I'm excited about.
Awesome. I'm excited. Yes, absolutely. Yes, please.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Rochelle Riley, Director of Arts and Culture for the City of Detroit. And although I'm not in your tribe yet, I am a part of your vanguard across the country, and I love you. So my question has to do with what we as arts directors navigate every day, where we walk that fine line between doing what our constituents and our stakeholders and our residents want and what meets the needs and themes of the foundations and the endowments and the folks with money, so that we can make those two meet. So I want to know, if you could look back a little bit, the most exciting project that the NEA has funded over the past few years, and what types of things like that you're looking for.
Ooh, the most exciting project. Oh my God.
And I also want to thank you for what you said about people tapping you because you were the only one around. At several companies, I was the Black Google, so I know what that's like. Thank you.
Yeah, I can't pick like one exciting thing at the Arts Endowment. There's so much interesting work that's happening, and I think, my colleagues who are on the National Council, I think, will attest to the diversity of things that the Arts Endowment invests in that a lot of people just don't know about. So whether it's that work with the military, or the Sound Health Network, which is looking at the impacts of music in neuroscience, and helping us to better understand how music connects to pain management and dealing with Alzheimer's, and all of these really interesting connections and benefits that if we embraced that and understood that warrants extending, amplifying, what would that look like? So I think that those are some examples. And then there's projects that are happening all over the country that have to do with any range of issues that we're dealing with as a society. And the ability to give voice to people as they wrestle with what's happening, that's important.
Yeah. And is there, just a quick follow-up on that, is there a geographic breadth to the grant making that
we fund in every congressional district. So all kinds of communities, rural, urban, suburban, exurban, you name it, we're there.
Yeah, absolutely awesome. Yes.
Hi, my name is Adiza Jabril, and I'm here with several of my colleagues from the United States Army Band Pershing Zone. And I really, thank you. I really appreciate you having mentioned the work that the NEA does with the DoD and the VA, because a lot of people don't know that the military is one of the biggest employers of musicians in the country. And so I am wondering, since you have this national perspective on arts policy, what you think the role of military music is in addressing racial injustice and racial inequity. Thanks.
That's a great question. I would, because you're in it, I would almost turn it back to you to say, what do you think? What do you want to see?
So I'm here with, again, a lot of my colleagues from our DEI team, and we are constantly kind of thinking about how, about the importance of being representative of the American public, because, you know, Black and brown people, I always say, we're overrepresented in a lot of the other fields in the military, but in the music, specifically the special bands field, the musicians field, we're underrepresented greatly. And it is something that we've been trying to correct in our own little corner of the military music world for years now, and we're going to keep trying to correct it. But I do think that there is a serious value in the American public seeing, you know, we're like the face of the military very often, seeing us reflected back in that way, and the understanding that patriotism is not specifically, there's not a white ownership of this country, that we all have a stake in the love and the creation and the pushing forward of this nation. So that, I know personally, that is what it means to me, but I'm still curious about what you think.
That's a beautiful answer. It really is. It's a beautiful answer. I think that in all facets, the military included, the kernel that I'm taking from what you said is something that I believe in, and it is that no one identity has the full claim of what it is to be American. And that kind of representation, and I don't mean just a superficial representation, but a deep representation that has to do not only with performing things that already exist, but creating new work. Excuse me. I think that investing, sorry. I think that investing in that kind of range of expression that is not only about performance, but it is also about making and making new. That's critical. And I wonder to what extent within the military there is that kind of investment in new kind of work, in new expression. I don't know the answer to that question, but I think it's an important one.
No, yes, absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And there's wonderful history because Colonel Fedek is now the new leader of bands at the University of Michigan here in Southeast Michigan. So we're very excited to be able to have that representation here. Yes.
All right. Ooh, thank you for being here. I'm Andrew Lee. I'm the founder and artistic director of DC Strings. My question is, given your background in urban planning and public administration, are there cross-sector insights that you believe the arts needs to implement or amplify to shift the conversation with funders around what's possible, so that we get out of this conversation of the power of the arts and everything that we know to be true, and can incubate the power of the arts so that we're not constantly fighting all the time for funding and to prove, the worth of our programs and impact?
So is the question about what it is that one can learn from other fields?
Yes.
Well, I think that there are often more similarities than there are differences between the arts and other fields. One of the things that's true, one of the things that's true is that we have to pay more attention to what people think of as core operating support. And I know that a lot of funders don't do that. I don't think we do that at the NEA even. But understanding what it takes to run an operation and what it takes over multiple years, not just from a year-to-year scenario, I think that's something we all have to consider, and that's not something that is specific only to the arts. That's something that's shared across fields that have a big presence in the nonprofit sector. So I think there's opportunity for alignment with some of the other fields that are also facing similar challenges with an imperfect nonprofit model. That's what comes to mind in response to that question.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. And so, very unfortunately, we are just about out of time, and there is, and I think I briefly maybe heard them testing the music of the dance party that awaits everyone, the plenary party. So I encourage everyone who to join us in Ontario East, which is on level 3, after this, which will definitely be the opportunity to all celebrate together, celebrate each other, and this wonderful launch. And just before we wrap up, I had just hope to kind of just ask a closing question, which is that for the next 2 days, everyone here is going to engage in incredible conversations and discourse, both through panels, but also we all know that such a big part of conferences, and especially Sphinx Connect, is all of the discussions that happen even outside of panels. And all of that's going to take place, and then everyone will return home. Is there any kind of guiding thought or thing that you think everyone should kind of have in their mind as they think about the next 2 days, and that they should try to have as kind of a personal mission?
I think oh, my voice is back. Sorry about that. To dwell in the realm of possibility, just for a while, feels like an important thing. I often, when I work with students, when I work with staff, when I work with colleagues, sometimes I feel like it's my role to encourage people to not edit themselves before they fully imagine what they actually want to see. So I would offer that is, can you give yourself the space to actually dream the thing without editing? The barriers will come up, no question. They'll happen, they'll show up. But can we dwell in that space of possibility at least for a little while before we actually go out and act?
Dr. Maria Rosario Jackson, thank you. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.